When they killed my presentation halfway through, they thought they'd buried my career. They didn't know the only thing they'd buried was their own $73 million lifeline, because the moment they pulled the plug on me, the investor they needed most walked out the door, with me. This isn't just a story about corporate betrayal. It's a lesson in what happens when you silence the wrong voice in the boardroom. My name is Alex Morgan, and until 6 months ago, I was the CTO and co-founder of Cortex Analytics, one of Austin's most promising AI data analytics startups. At 36, I'd spent the better part of a decade building algorithms that could parse through petabytes of unstructured data faster than any of our competitors. I wasn't just another tech executive with a fancy title. I was the architect of every line of code that made our platform valuable. The morning everything changed started like any other pitch day. I'd been up since 4 a.m., running through my presentation slides one last time. The coffee maker in my downtown loft gurgled as I reviewed the technical specifications that would showcase our latest breakthrough to Isabelle Laurent, the managing director of Europe's most prestigious venture capital fund. Her firm, Sovereign Capital, was considering a $73 million Series D investment that would catapult Cortex into the unicorn stratosphere. I'd built something revolutionary. Our new compression algorithm could double data processing speeds while cutting server costs by 40%. In the world of enterprise analytics, that wasn't just an improvement, it was a game changer. Every Fortune 500 company struggling with data overload would kill for this technology, and I was the only person who truly understood how it worked. The Uber ride to our headquarters gave me 20 minutes to reflect on how far we'd come. When I'd first met my co-founder, Marcus Rivera, we were just two engineers tired of watching inferior products dominate the market. Marcus handled the business side while I lived in the code. It was a perfect partnership, or so I thought. Marcus had stepped back from day-to-day operations after our Series C, content to remain chairman while collecting his equity checks. That's when the board brought in Troy Whitaker. Troy was everything I wasn't: Harvard MBA, Goldman Sachs pedigree, and a smile that could charm investors out of their Italian leather shoes. He spoke in buzzwords and quarterly projections, while I spoke in algorithms and data structures. The board loved him. They said he was exactly what Cortex needed to scale to the next level. What they meant was he looked good in a suit and could schmooze at country clubs. I should have seen the warning signs when Troy started scheduling alignment meetings without me, or when he hired a new VP of engineering who reported directly to him instead of me. But I was too deep in perfecting our technology to play politics. That was my first mistake. The Cortex offices occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming tower overlooking Lady Bird Lake. As I stepped off the elevator, our receptionist, Maria, gave me a nervous smile. "Morning, Alex. Troy wants to see you before the presentation." The knot in my stomach tightened. Troy never wanted to see me unless he was about to drop some corporate doublespeak about optimizing our human capital or right-sizing our technical priorities. I found him in the main conference room, rehearsing his own slides with our new VP of marketing. A woman named Jennifer, who'd been hired 3 weeks ago and still couldn't explain what our product actually did. "Alex, perfect timing," Troy said, his teeth gleaming under the LED lights. "Small change to today's flow. I'll be handling the main presentation. We need you to focus on the technical deep dive in the second half." The second half, I kept my voice steady. "Troy, Isabelle specifically requested that I walk through our core technology. It's the entire reason Sovereign is interested." "And you will," he assured me, placing a patronizing hand on my shoulder. "But we need to set the right context first. Show them the vision before we get into the weeds." The weeds, that's what he called the technology that powered our entire company. I wanted to tell him that without those weeds, his vision was nothing but PowerPoint fantasies. Instead, I nodded and walked to my office. My jaw clenched so tight I could feel my molars grinding. My corner office had always been my sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling windows, 3 monitors displaying real-time system performance, and a whiteboard covered in equations that looked like hieroglyphics to anyone else but made perfect sense to me. I pulled up the email chain with Isabelle's team. Her technical advisor, Dr. Klaus Weber, had specifically requested a detailed walkthrough of our proprietary compression algorithms. They weren't interested in Troy's vision. They wanted to understand the magic under the hood. At 9:55 a.m., I made my way back to the boardroom. The Sovereign Capital team had arrived 5 people in expensive European suits, with Isabel at the center. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything in the room. When she shook my hand, her grip was firm and confident. "Mr. Morgan, I've been looking forward to this. Klaus hasn't stopped talking about your white paper on recursive data compression." Before I could respond, Troy swooped in like a corporate vulture. "Isabel, so wonderful to finally meet in person. Let's get everyone seated so we can blow your minds." The next 45 minutes were torture. Troy's presentation was all sizzle, no steak. He'd taken my technical innovations and buried them under layers of marketing fluff. Paradigm shifts and synergistic solutions flew from his mouth while the Sovereign team's eyes gradually glazed over. I caught Dr. Weber checking his phone twice. Finally, mercifully, Troy clicked to a slide that said, "Technical Deep Dive," and turned to me. "Alex, why don't you walk our friends through the specifics?" I stood, feeling the familiar comfort of being able to talk about something real. My first slide showed our compression algorithm's mathematical foundation. What we've developed is a novel approach to data compression that uses predictive modeling to— "Actually," Troy interrupted, "let's keep this high level. I'm sure our guests don't need a computer science lecture." The room went silent. Isabel's eyes narrowed slightly. "Dr." Weber looked up from his phone. I turned to Troy, keeping my voice professional. "With respect, Isabel's team specifically requested a technical presentation. This is why they're here." Troy's smile never wavered, but I saw the steel beneath. "And I'm sure they appreciate the gesture, but as CEO, I think I have a better sense of what our investors need to hear." "Your investors." The words escaped before I could stop them. "Troy, I built this technology, every algorithm, every optimization, every breakthrough that makes Cortex worth investing in came from my team." "Your team works for Cortex," Troy said, his voice taking on an edge. "And Cortex has decided to take a different direction." "What different direction?" Troy clicked to a new slide I'd never seen before. It showed a completely different product roadmap, one that abandoned our core technology in favor of what looked like a generic business intelligence platform. "We're pivoting to a more market-friendly solution, something that doesn't require a PhD to understand." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You're killing the compression algorithm. That's the entire competitive advantage. Without it, we're just another—" "Thank you, Alex. We'll take it from here." Troy's dismissal was as clear as a slap. I stood there for a moment, looking at the faces around the table. Our CFO, Janet, wouldn't meet my eyes. The VP of Sales studied his coffee cup like it contained the secrets of the universe. Only Isabel looked directly at me, and something in her expression made me straighten my shoulders. "No," I said quietly. "I don't think you will." I turned to Isabel. "Ms. Laurent, what Troy isn't telling you is that without the compression algorithm, Cortex has no viable product. What he's showing you is vaporware that will never achieve the performance metrics your team requires. If you're genuinely interested in understanding what you'd be investing in, I'd be happy to explain. Otherwise, you're about to write a very expensive check for a very pretty PowerPoint deck." Troy's face flushed red. "Alex, you're out of line. Please leave the room." "He's right," I continued, ignoring Troy. "I should leave the room. In fact, I should leave the company. But before I do, you should know that every algorithm running on our platform requires my personal encryption keys to function. It's a security measure I implemented in our first year. Without those keys, your servers will stop processing data within 72 hours. It wasn't a bluff. When we'd first started Cortex, I'd been paranoid about intellectual property theft. The encryption system I'd built was my insurance policy, though I'd never imagined using it against my own company. Isabel stood up. "Gentlemen, I think we need a brief recess." The room erupted as soon as she spoke. Troy started barking orders about legal action and contracts. Janet frantically typed on her phone, probably alerting our general counsel, but I kept my eyes on Isabel, who was having a quiet conversation with Dr. Weber in rapid German. After a moment, she approached me. "Mr. Morgan, might we speak privately?" We stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the lake. The morning sun reflected off the water. creating patterns that reminded me of data visualization models. "Tell me," Isabel said, lighting a cigarette, "how long has Mr. Whitaker been planning this pivot?" 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, I admitted. He's been slowly moving my team to other priorities while bringing in consultants to build his new platform. And the encryption keys are mine, my personal intellectual property, licensed to Cortex under specific terms that require my continued involvement in any technical decisions. I pulled out my phone and showed her the contract. My lawyer insisted on it after another startup tried to force out their technical founder, Cynthia Marks, best technology lawyer in Austin. Isabel smiled for the first time. "I know Cynthia. She negotiated against us on the Databricks deal. Cost us an extra $10 million. She took a long drag of her cigarette. "Tell me, Alex, what would happen if you were to leave Cortex today?" "Honestly, the platform would gradually degrade. They might keep it running for a few months, maybe a year if they're lucky, but without the ability to update the core algorithms, they'd fall behind the competition. The company would be worthless within 18 months. And if you stayed?" I laughed bitterly. "Troy just showed you his plan. He wants to be the next Salesforce, not the next Palantir. He doesn't understand that our technology is what makes us special. He just sees dollar signs and market caps." Isabel stubbed out her cigarette. "What if I told you that Sovereign Capital has no interest in investing in another generic B2B SaaS platform, that the only reason we're here is because Klaus convinced me your compression algorithm could revolutionize our portfolio company's data infrastructure? Then I'd say you're about to waste a trip to Austin." "Perhaps, or perhaps not." She studied me with those sharp eyes. "Give me 24 hours. Alex, don't do anything rash. Can you do that?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We returned to the conference room to find chaos. Troy was mid-rant about insubordination and breach of contract. He fell silent when he saw us. "My apologies, Mr. Whitaker," Isabel said smoothly, "but Sovereign Capital will need to postpone our decision. We have some internal discussions to conduct." She turned to me. "Mr. Morgan, I trust you'll be available if we have technical questions." "Of course," I replied, enjoying the way Troy's jaw clenched. The Sovereign team filed out, leaving me alone with Troy and the executive team. The silence was deafening. "You're fired," Troy said finally. "Security will escort you out. We'll have legal contact you about the encryption keys." "Good luck with that," I said, gathering my things. "Cynthia will be happy to explain why you can't force me to surrender personal property that's only licensed to the company under specific terms you just violated." The walk to my office felt like a funeral march. Word spread quickly in startup offices, and I could feel eyes on me from every cubicle. Some of my engineers looked stricken. Others seemed relieved, like they'd been expecting this shoe to drop. I was packing up my personal items when Marcus appeared in my doorway. My co-founder, the man I'd built this company with, couldn't even look me in the eye. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he said quietly. "Then how was it supposed to happen? Marcus, were you going to wait until after the funding closed to kick me out?" He shifted uncomfortably. "The board felt you were becoming a bottleneck, too focused on perfection instead of market penetration." "The board," I repeated. "You mean Troy convinced you that you'd make more money with the inferior product and better marketing?" "It's not that simple." "It never is." I sealed the box with my personal belongings. "You know what the funny thing is? I would have gladly stepped aside if you'd just asked. Found a CTO who could execute Troy's vision while I focused on R&D, but you had to make it an ambush." Marcus finally met my eyes. "Troy said you'd never agree, that you were too emotionally invested in the technology." "Troy was wrong about a lot of things," I said, walking past him. "You'll figure that out soon enough." Security was waiting by the elevator. Two beefy guys who looked apologetic about the whole situation. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of my team watching from the engineering floor. Some of them were already updating their LinkedIn profiles. The Austin heat hit me like a wall as I exited the building. I stood on the sidewalk, holding a cardboard box of personal belongings, feeling oddly liberated. My phone buzzed with messages engineers asking what happened, recruiters who'd somehow already heard the news, and one from Cynthia that just said, "Don't sign anything. On my way." I took an Uber to Cynthia's office in a converted house near the university. She was waiting with coffee and a legal pad, her expression somewhere between amused and outraged. "So," she said, sliding a mug across her desk, "Troy Whitaker finally played his hand. You knew this was coming." "I suspected. When they brought in outside counsel last month to review contracts, I figured they were looking for a way to push you out." She pulled up documents on her computer. "The good news is, your IP retention clause is ironclad. They can't force you to transfer the encryption keys without violating the license agreement. And if they claim the keys are work product..." Cynthia smiled like a shark. "Then we point out that you developed the encryption system before Cortex was incorporated, as demonstrated by the provisional patent you filed 6 months before meeting Marcus." She slid a document across the desk. "You did file that provisional patent, right?" I laughed, remembering her insistence on that filing years ago. "You're worth every penny of your retainer." "I'm worth more. But let's focus on the immediate issue. They'll try to claim you're holding the company hostage. We need to be prepared for..." My phone rang. Isabelle Laurent. "Mr. Morgan. I hope I'm not interrupting. Could you meet me for coffee? There's a place called Epic on North Loop. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Cynthia raised an eyebrow. "The investor." I nodded. "She wants to meet..." "Take the meeting," Cynthia advised. "But don't commit to anything without running it by me first." Epoch. Coffee was packed with the usual Austin crowd: students, remote workers, and startup founders having hushed conversations over cortados. I found Isabel in a corner booth, looking remarkably relaxed for someone who'd just watched a potential investment implode. "Alex," she greeted me. "Thank you for coming. I've had an interesting afternoon." "Let me guess. Troy called you with a new pitch about how I'm a disgruntled employee trying to sabotage the company." "Something like that." She sipped her espresso. "He also threatened to sue Sovereign Capital if we pursue any business relationship with you." "Empty threat. I haven't violated any non-compete clauses because I haven't competed, yet." That's the key word, isn't it?" Isabel leaned forward. "Tell me, what would you do if you had the resources to build your vision without interference?" I'd been thinking about that question during the entire Uber ride. I'd build what Cortex should have been, a platform that actually delivers on the promise of AI-driven analytics, no compromises, no dumbing down for mass market appeal. And you believe you could do this? The technical side. Absolutely. I'd need to rebuild some components from scratch to avoid any IP issues with Cortex. But the fundamental innovations are mine, the business side. I shrugged. That's never been my strength. "Which is why you'd need a partner," Isabel signaled for another espresso. "Let me be direct. Sovereign Capital isn't just a venture fund. We're building a portfolio of complementary technology companies. Your compression algorithm would be incredibly valuable to several of our existing investments." "You want to license the technology. I want to fund you to build something better than Cortex, a new company, properly structured, with you maintaining control of the technical direction." She pulled out a tablet and showed me a simple diagram. "We've been planning to create an advanced analytics subsidiary. We have the customers, the infrastructure, and the capital. What we lack is the technology and the visionary to build it. And in exchange, Sovereign Capital would provide $20 million in initial funding, access to our portfolio companies as beta customers, and this is crucial: complete autonomy on technical decisions. You'd be CEO and CTO. We'd help you hire a business-focused president, but they'd report to you." It was everything I'd wanted Cortex to be, but I'd learned to be suspicious of things that sounded too good. "What's the catch?" Isabel smiled. "The catch is that we need someone who can deliver revolutionary technology, not just incremental improvements. Based on what Klaus tells me, you're one of perhaps 5 people in the world who could build what we need. The question is whether you're willing to bet on yourself." "I need to think about it and talk to my lawyer." "Of course, but Alex, don't think too long. Troy is already scrambling to find engineers who can maintain your systems. He'll fail, but he might convince other investors to bridge fund him while he tries." We shook hands, and I walked back into the Austin heat with my mind racing. Starting over would mean recruiting a team, rebuilding infrastructure, and competing directly with the company I'd co-founded. It would mean war with Troy and Marcus, and everyone who'd chosen their side. My phone buzzed. A text from James Park, one of my senior engineers. Heard what happened. Troy just called in all hands. This should be interesting. Then another, from Sarah Williams, my lead data scientist. We're in the main conference room. Troy's trying to explain the new direction. Want me to live stream it? I smiled despite everything. Just take notes. We'll talk soon. The next 72 hours were a blur of legal consultations, phone calls, and strategic planning. Cynthia worked her magic, ensuring that any technology I developed independently wouldn't violate my agreements with Cortex. The encryption key situation gave us leverage I couldn't be forced to hand them over. But I also couldn't use that as a weapon without facing potential lawsuits. The smart play, Cynthia advised, is to offer a transition period. You'll maintain the systems for 90 days while they find alternatives. In exchange, they release you from all non-compete restrictions and acknowledge your ownership of the core encryption IP. They'll never agree to that. They will when their systems start throwing errors. She was right. By day 3, I received a panicked call from Janet, our CFO. Alex, our primary data cluster is showing critical warnings. The team says it's related to key rotation. The system automatically requests new encryption keys every 72 hours, I explained. It's a security feature. Without manual intervention, it'll lock down to prevent potential breaches. Can you fix it? Of course, but we should probably discuss terms first. The negotiation that followed was swift and brutal. Troy postured about legal action until their own lawyers explained the reality of the situation. Within a week, we had an agreement I'd provide technical support for 90 days, train their team on basic maintenance, and in exchange, Cortex would acknowledge my IP rights and waive all restrictive covenants. During those 90 days, I built the foundation of something new. Isabel's offer had evolved into a comprehensive partnership. The new company, which we named Prometheus Analytics, would be headquartered in Austin, but backed by European capital and customers. I insisted on maintaining majority control, with Sovereign Capital taking a 40% stake. The real vindication came from my former team. One by one, my best engineers reached out. They'd seen Troy's vision for Cortex, and they wanted no part of it. Sarah Williams was the first to officially resign, followed by James Park and 6 others. By the time my 90-day obligation ended, the entire core engineering team had submitted notice. This is poaching, Troy raged during one of our transition meetings. We'll sue every one of them. They're at-will employees making career decisions, I replied calmly, unless you're suggesting they're not free to leave. The Cortex board tried damage control. They offered retention bonuses, equity refreshes, anything to stem the bleeding. But engineers talk, and word had spread about the pivot away from innovative technology. The company that had once attracted top talent by promising to push boundaries was now just another enterprise software vendor chasing quarterly numbers. Marcus called me 2 months into building Prometheus. We need to talk. We met at the same coffee shop where we'd first sketched out Cortex on napkins 5 years earlier. He looked tired, older somehow. Troy's gone, he said without preamble. The board fired him yesterday. I wasn't surprised. Without the core technology team, Cortex's product development had ground to a halt. Customer renewals were down, and the new platform Troy had promised was nowhere near ready. They want you back, Marcus continued. Full autonomy, whatever title you want, double your previous equity stake. It's too late for that. I know. He stared into his coffee. I screwed up. Alex, I let Troy convince me that you were the problem instead of the solution. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late to stop it. You could have talked to me. We built this company together. Marcus, all you had to do was have one honest conversation. I know, he repeated. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I believed him, but it didn't change anything. Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild. We finished our coffee in silence. 2 former partners who'd taken different paths and could never walk together again. 6 months after that confrontation in the Cortex boardroom, Prometheus Analytics launched publicly. Our first product was everything I'd wanted to build at Cortex, a data analytics platform that could process information 10 times faster than anything else on the market. The compression algorithm I'd refined made it possible to analyze datasets that would have crushed traditional systems. Our first major customer was one of Sovereign Capital's portfolio companies, a European telecommunications giant that needed to process billions of call records in real time. The successful implementation led to 3 more contracts within a month. By the end of our first year, Prometheus had 40 enterprise customers and revenue that exceeded Cortex's best quarter. The industry press loved the David versus Goliath narrative. Former CTO builds Cortex killer, read one headline. How a technical founder's revenge created Austin's hottest startup, proclaimed another. I tried to stay above the fray, focusing on building great technology rather than settling scores. But the market had its own form of justice. Cortex struggled to maintain its existing customers without the ability to improve its core platform. The pivot Troy had championed turned out to be exactly what I'd predicted: vaporware that couldn't compete with established players. 18 months after I left, Cortex was acquired by a larger competitor for less than their last valuation. The investors who'd backed the Series D that never happened lost millions. I was in my new office, reviewing code with my team, when Isabel called with the news. Oracle just announced the Cortex acquisition, she said. $30 million for the whole company. That's less than half what they raised in total funding. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and mostly meant it. Despite everything, Cortex had been my baby once. Watching it fail brought no joy. Are you Troy Whitaker just took a 90% loss on his equity? Marcus Rivera's stake is essentially worthless. Meanwhile, Prometheus is valued at $400 million in our latest internal assessment. It was never about the money. No, Isabel agreed. It was about building something extraordinary, which is exactly what you've done. She was right, though it had taken me a while to see it. The betrayal at Cortex had forced me to stop being just an engineer and become a leader. I'd learned to fight for my vision, to protect my people, and to never again let anyone silence me when I had something important to say. My new office had the same view of Lady Bird Lake, just from a different building. Sometimes I could see the Cortex Tower in the distance, a reminder of hard lessons learned. The engineers who'd followed me to Prometheus had all received founding equity stakes. Sarah Williams was now my VP of engineering. James Park led our machine learning division. We'd built not just a better product, but a better company. The sweetest vindication came in small moments. Former Cortex customers who switched to Prometheus and told us how much better our platform performed. Engineers from other companies who sought us out because they'd heard we valued technical excellence over corporate politics, the satisfaction of building something the right way, without compromise. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I found a group of my engineers still working, not because of deadlines, but because they were excited about solving a particularly complex problem. Sarah looked up from her screen with the same expression of joy I'd felt when I first discovered the compression algorithm that started everything. Alex, come look at this. I think we just figured out how to reduce latency by another 30%. I pulled up a chair, ready to dive into the technical details with my team. This was what I'd always wanted: a place where the best ideas won, where innovation mattered more than politics, where building great technology was the highest priority. As we worked through the problem together, I thought about that morning when Troy had cut me off mid-presentation. He'd thought he was ending my career, but he'd actually set me free. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes being silenced teaches you to roar. The code on the screen evolved as we refined the algorithm, each iteration bringing us closer to something revolutionary. Outside, the Austin skyline glittered with the lights of 1,000 other startups, each chasing their own dreams. But inside our conference room, surrounded by brilliant engineers who'd chosen to bet on a vision rather than a safe paycheck, I knew we were building something special. Troy had been wrong about many things, but his biggest mistake was underestimating the power of genuine innovation. He'd thought marketing could replace engineering, that vision statements could substitute for actual vision. The market had proven him wrong in the most brutal way possible. As for me, I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying those who wronged you, it's building something so undeniably better that their failure becomes inevitable. Every line of code we wrote at Prometheus was proof that technical excellence matters, that silencing the experts in favor of empty suits is a recipe for disaster. The algorithm was complete. Sarah's optimization would indeed reduce latency by 30%, opening up new possibilities for real-time analytics. My team high-fived each other, already planning the next improvement. This was what victory looked like, not standing over the corpse of a failed company, but building something that made the world a little better, one innovation at a time. I closed my laptop and prepared to head home, satisfied with another day's progress. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve, new heights to reach. But tonight, I was content knowing that when they'd tried to silence me in that boardroom, they'd only amplified my voice. When they'd tried to bury my vision, they'd planted the seeds of something far greater. The 73 million investor hadn't just walked out with me that day. She'd walked toward a future where merit mattered more than politics, where building great things was more important than playing corporate games. And in the end, that future was worth more than any amount of venture capital. As I waited for the elevator, my phone buzzed with a message from a former Cortex board member who'd voted to support Troy's coup. Congratulations on the Samsung partnership announcement. Would love to catch up sometime. I deleted the message without responding. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ash. The elevator arrived, and I stepped inside, riding down toward the Austin evening and whatever challenges tomorrow would bring. Behind me, the Prometheus offices hummed with the energy of creation, of brilliant minds working together to push the boundaries of what's possible. They'd cut me off mid-pitch, thinking they were taking control of the narrative. Instead, they'd given me the freedom to write my own story. And what a story it turned out to be.